Harrison Cole stood in his office, staring at the latest employee satisfaction reports. The numbers were bad, worse than bad. Complaints about management, high turnover, and a dip in customer service ratings. His father had built this chain of 11 family-style restaurants from the ground up, and when Harrison inherited it 2 years ago, he vowed to honor that legacy. But now, something was clearly wrong, and he wasn't getting straight answers from his district managers. He had always been a behind-the-scenes owner, letting managers handle the day-to-day operations. The restaurants were spread across multiple cities, and most of the employees had never met him in person. He wasn't the kind of CEO who put his face on newsletters or company-wide emails. That worked fine until now. Frustrated, he made a decision. He needed to see what was really happening in his restaurants, not through reports or second-hand accounts, but with his own eyes. 2 days later, Harrison walked into one of his locations wearing an old hoodie, jeans, and a pair of worn-out sneakers. His normally sharp haircut was hidden under a baseball cap, and he'd grown out some stubble. He had applied as a part-time janitor under a fake name, Harry Collins. It was the perfect cover. No one paid much attention to the janitor. The restaurant was busy when he arrived for his first shift. Customers chatted over plates of burgers and fries, waiters rushed between tables, and the kitchen clattered with activity. He spotted the general manager, a tall, broad-shouldered man named Greg, barking orders at a young server who looked close to tears. Harrison clenched his jaw but forced himself to stay quiet. He was here to observe. An older janitor, Lewis, greeted him with a tired smile. "You must be the new guy." "I'll show you the ropes." Lewis had been with the company for over 15 years. Harrison had read his file. He was one of the longest-serving employees in the entire chain. "Thanks," Harrison said, picking up a mop bucket. For the next few hours, he followed Lewis around, wiping down tables, cleaning the restrooms, and taking out the trash. It was tough, thankless work, but Lewis did it without complaint. Then, just as Harrison was finishing up in the break room, he heard Greg's voice echo down the hall. "Lewis, I don't know why you're still working here," Greg sneered. "You're slow, you're old, and honestly, this place would be better off without you." Harrison stopped in his tracks. Lewis kept his head down, gripping the mop handle tightly. "I do my job, sir." "Barely," Greg scoffed. "You're pathetic. I've been telling corporate we need to replace you, but they won't listen. Probably some stupid policy about keeping dead weight. Just don't slow down the new guy." Harrison's blood boiled. The sheer disrespect in Greg's voice made his hands tighten into fists. But he forced himself to stay calm. He wasn't blowing his cover yet. Lewis didn't respond. He just nodded and went back to scrubbing the floor. Harrison knew he needed to see more. He had to know if this was just a one-time thing or if Greg treated all his employees this way, so he kept working. And kept watching. By the end of the shift, he had seen enough. Servers were afraid to speak up, kitchen staff flinched when Greg passed by, and even the assistant manager seemed to avoid him. Harrison took a deep breath. Greg had no idea who he was talking down to. But he was about to find out. Harrison finished his shift without drawing attention to himself. He kept his head down, listened, and absorbed everything happening around him. By the time he clocked out, he had a clearer picture of the toxic environment Greg had created. Employees operated under a constant cloud of fear, speaking in hushed tones whenever Greg was nearby. Even customers seemed to sense something was off. A few had been outright ignored by the waitstaff, too overwhelmed to keep up with the relentless pace. Harrison stepped outside into the cool evening air and watched as Lewis slowly walked toward the bus stop, shoulders slightly hunched, as if carrying a weight that had nothing to do with his mop. Harrison felt a deep respect for the man 15 years in this company, never complaining, never asking for special treatment, just doing his job. And yet, he was being treated like a disposable burden. The next morning, Harrison returned for his second shift, ready to dig deeper. This time, he focused on the kitchen. The moment he stepped through the swinging doors, a wave of heat and tension hit him. The cooks moved quickly, sweat beading on their foreheads as they scrambled to keep up with orders. A young line cook, probably in his early 20s, was plating a burger when Greg stormed in. "That's sloppy," Greg snapped, snatching up the plate and holding it up for everyone to see. "Does that look like something we serve here? Do you have any pride in your work at all?" The cook's face flushed as he quickly adjusted the presentation. Greg tossed the plate onto the counter. "Do it again. And if you screw it up, don't bother coming back tomorrow." Harrison saw the way the other kitchen staff avoided eye contact, pretending they hadn't heard. Fear kept them silent. Greg turned and spotted Harrison by the sink scrubbing trays. "You," he barked. "You're not here to stand around. If you don't look busy, you're gone." Harrison met his gaze but said nothing. He grabbed another tray and continued scrubbing. As the shift went on, Harrison noticed more cracks in the operation. Food was being sent out cold because the waitstaff was overwhelmed. A server had asked Greg for a second set of hands for the dinner rush, only to be told, "Figure it out or find another job." Then, just before closing, Harrison saw something that made his decision final. Lewis was in the stockroom, lifting a heavy crate of cleaning supplies when Greg walked in. "You still here?" Greg scoffed. "Unbelievable." Lewis hesitated but didn't respond. Greg shook his head. "You don't even move fast enough to be useful. If it were up to me, you'd be out of here already." Lewis's grip tightened on the crate, but he kept his head down. Greg leaned in slightly, voice dropping. "You know why I haven't fired you? Because corporate won't let me. But trust me, old man, I'll make sure you quit soon enough." That was it. Harrison had seen enough. The next morning, Harrison arrived at the restaurant, but not as Harry Collins. He walked in through the front doors in a crisp button-up shirt, well-fitted slacks, and polished shoes. The stubble was gone, the baseball cap replaced with his usual composed demeanor. Greg was at the counter, berating a server about a misplaced order when he noticed Harrison. "Can I help you?" Greg asked, already sounding irritated. Harrison looked around the restaurant, taking in the staff's exhausted faces, the nervous glances. Then he turned his full attention to Greg. "Yes, you can," Harrison said. "You can step into the office with me now." Greg frowned. "And you are?" Harrison let the silence hang for a moment before speaking. "I'm Harrison Cole, owner of this company." The color drained from Greg's face. The restaurant fell into an immediate hush. Servers, cooks, even customers who had overheard the exchange turned to watch. Greg forced a laugh. "You," he shook his head. "You're joking." Harrison didn't blink. "Office, now." Greg hesitated, but there was no escaping this. He turned and walked stiffly toward the back, Harrison right behind him. The moment the door shut, Greg attempted to regain control. "Mr. Cole, I had no idea you were coming." "If I had known," Harrison cut him off. "That's exactly the problem. You don't know when the owner is watching, yet this is how you behave. What does that tell me?" Greg swallowed hard. "I've been working here undercover for the past 2 days," Harrison continued. "I saw everything. The way you treat your staff, the way you talk to Lewis, the way you threaten people's jobs like it's a game." Greg straightened. "With all due respect, sir, I run a tight ship. This is a tough business and sometimes you have to be firm. If employees can't handle it, maybe they're not cut out for the job." Harrison's expression didn't change. "Firm is one thing. Humiliating people is another. Running a business means leading, not tearing people down. And from what I've seen, you have no idea how to lead." Greg scoffed. "I get results." Harrison leaned forward slightly. "At what cost?" Greg had no answer. "There's no place for this kind of leadership in my company," Harrison said. "You're done here." Greg's mouth opened, then closed. He glanced toward the door as if considering an argument, but there was nothing he could say. Harrison didn't wait for a response. He opened the door and gestured toward the exit. "Collect your things and leave." Greg hesitated for a moment, then walked past him without another word. As Harrison stepped back into the main area of the restaurant, all eyes were on him. He turned to Lewis, who was still standing near the supply closet, looking unsure of what had just happened. Harrison approached him. "Lewis, I want to apologize." Lewis blinked. "For what, sir?" For letting someone like him run this place unchecked, Harrison sighed. You've been with this company for 15 years. That deserves respect, not mistreatment. Lewis shifted uncomfortably. I just do my job, and you do it well, Harrison said. That's why I'm promoting you. You'll be head of facility maintenance for this location with a raise. Lewis's eyes widened. I thank you, sir. Harrison turned to the rest of the staff. Things are going to change here, he said. This company was built to be a place where employees are valued. That starts now. A quiet murmur rippled through the employees, a mix of relief and surprise. Harrison meant every word. This was just the beginning. After Greg left, the tension in the restaurant didn't disappear immediately. The staff exchanged cautious glances, unsure of what to expect next. Harrison could see it in their expressions. Years of working under a manager like Greg didn't just fade away in an instant. Harrison didn't waste time. He walked toward the assistant manager, a woman in her mid-30s with tired eyes and a professional posture. Her name tag read Dana. You've been here a while, Harrison asked. Dana hesitated, then nodded. 4 years. He studied her, noting the way she stood composed but uncertain. Did you ever report Greg's behavior? Her lips pressed together. A few times, but complaints never went anywhere. He told us corporate wouldn't care. Harrison exhaled slowly. That explained a lot. If staff believed they had no voice, they wouldn't bother speaking up. That was a failure on his part, one he fully intended to fix. Who else here has management experience? He asked, looking at the rest of the team. A young man in the kitchen, wearing a grease-stained apron, raised his hand. I was a shift lead at my last job before I started here. Harrison nodded. Good, for now, Dana, you're acting general manager. I'll be bringing in someone to help, but in the meantime, I want this place running with respect. Understood? Dana's eyes widened slightly, but then she straightened. Understood. He turned to the employees still standing nearby. I know Greg made you believe that speaking up didn't matter. That changes today. If you have concerns, you bring them to Dana, and if you don't feel comfortable doing that, I'll be setting up a direct line to corporate. No more being ignored. A murmur spread through the team, the first signs of relief breaking the surface. Harrison wasn't finished yet. He walked toward Lewis, who had remained quiet through the entire exchange. I need to know something, Harrison said, keeping his voice steady. Why did you stay here so long, even with the way Greg treated you? Lewis looked down at his hands, weathered from years of work. Because this job puts food on my table, because I've been here almost as long as this building has, because I believed at some point things might get better. Harrison felt the weight of those words. They will, he said. Starting now. Lewis gave a small nod as if he wanted to believe it but wasn't ready to just yet. Harrison turned back to Dana. I'll be reviewing payroll. If Greg was cutting corners there, I want to know. If anyone's been denied raises or overtime pay, bring me the records. Dana's expression shifted, surprise flashing across her face. You think he was skimming from payroll? I don't assume, Harrison said. I verify. Dana hesitated, then nodded. I'll pull everything. Harrison knew he wasn't done. Firing Greg was just the start. There were likely deeper issues in the company's structure that allowed someone like him to operate unchecked, but one thing was clear. This restaurant and the people in it deserved better. And he intended to make sure they got it. Harrison spent the next several hours in the back office, reviewing payroll records while Dana and the team kept the restaurant running. The deeper he dug, the more troubling patterns he found. Overtime hours mysteriously missing, promised raises that had never been processed, and unexplained deductions from some employees' paychecks. It was clear Greg had been manipulating the system to his advantage, either skimming money or cutting costs by withholding wages. Dana knocked lightly on the doorframe before stepping in. She had a stack of papers in her hands and a weary but determined look on her face. She placed the files on the desk, flipping open one in particular. I went through the last year's payroll records, she said. Greg denied multiple raise requests, even though corporate had approved them. And look at this, he adjusted clock-in times for some employees, shaving minutes off shifts. Harrison scanned the documents, his jaw tightening. It was worse than he had expected. "How long has this been happening?" Dana crossed her arms. "At least a year, probably longer. I don't know how he got away with it, but no one ever questioned him. He always said he had corporates backing, and people were afraid to push back." Harrison knew exactly how Greg had maintained control. Fear and manipulation. Employees who relied on their paychecks wouldn't risk speaking out if they believed no one would listen. That was why the culture had to change from the top down. He closed the files and stood. "Everyone who's missing wages is getting what they're owed. Today." Dana nodded. "I'll start processing the corrections." Harrison left the office and stepped back into the main dining area. The restaurant was running smoother than before, but there was still a hesitancy in the air. Employees weren't sure if the changes would last, if things would truly be different. He needed to prove they would. He called for everyone's attention, gathering the staff near the break area. They stood in a loose circle, waiting, unsure of what to expect. He looked around, making sure to meet their eyes. "I've gone through the payroll records. Some of you were denied raises, some had hours cut without your knowledge. That stops now. If you're missing any pay, you'll be receiving it immediately." A few people exchanged surprised glances. It was as if they wanted to believe it but weren't ready to trust just yet. Lewis stood slightly off to the side, his expression unreadable. Harrison turned to him. "You've given this company 15 years and you've been treated like you don't matter. That's unacceptable. From now on, you'll be leading facility maintenance here and you'll have the authority to hire additional help when needed." Lewis hesitated, as if waiting for a catch. "You're serious?" Harrison nodded. "Completely?" For the first time, something in Lewis's posture relaxed. He gave a small nod of understanding. A younger employee, the same line cook Greg had berated the day before, finally spoke up. "What about management? Are we getting someone new?" Harrison glanced at Dana. "For now, Dana is in charge, but I'll be bringing in additional leadership to support her." The cook nodded, seeming satisfied with the answer. A server shifted uncomfortably before speaking. "Greg always said corporate didn't care about us, that if we had problems, we were on our own." Harrison's expression hardened. "That's the exact opposite of how this company should be run. There will be a direct line for employee concerns, and I will personally make sure complaints are handled." A murmur of agreement went through the group. For the first time, there was a shift, a sense that maybe, just maybe, things would be different moving forward. Harrison stepped back, giving them space to absorb the changes. He wasn't expecting instant trust, but he was laying the foundation for something better. He pulled Dana aside. "I want weekly reports on operations, no more surprises. If anything like this happens again, I want to know immediately." Dana gave a firm nod. "I'll make sure of it." As the restaurant settled back into its rhythm, Harrison stepped outside for a moment, letting the cool air clear his thoughts. He had come undercover to see the truth, and what he had found was worse than he had imagined. But now, he had the opportunity to fix it, not just here but across the entire company. This wasn't just about one bad manager. It was about rebuilding a culture where employees felt valued and respected. And he wasn't going to stop until that was a reality. Harrison stayed late after the restaurant closed, sitting at the manager's desk surrounded by paperwork. The financial discrepancies he had uncovered were serious, but they were only part of the bigger issue. The culture inside this restaurant had been shaped by fear and neglect, and fixing that wouldn't happen overnight. Dana knocked lightly on the open door before stepping inside. She had a cautious but resolute look about her, as if she was still adjusting to the shift in power. "I went through the scheduling system," she said. "Greg manipulated shifts to keep labor costs down. He would cut people early but still expect them to finish their work off the clock. That's why a lot of the kitchen staff stopped staying late to clean properly. They weren't getting paid for it." Harrison exhaled slowly. "So he was forcing unpaid work while claiming he was improving efficiency." She nodded. "Exactly. He made people think they had no choice. If they pushed back, he'd threaten their jobs." Harrison leaned back slightly, his mind already turning over solutions. We need a full audit of every location. If he was doing this here, there's a chance others are pulling the same thing. Dana hesitated before speaking again. I can reach out to the other managers, but some of them were close to Greg. They might not be honest about what's happening in their stores. Harrison considered her words. He had relied too much on second-hand reports before, and that had allowed problems like this to fester. That wasn't an option anymore. I'll visit every location myself, he said. Unannounced. Dana raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. You're going undercover again? He didn't answer right away. He wasn't sure if he needed to disguise himself this time. Word of what had happened here would spread soon enough, but he knew one thing for certain. He would no longer be an absent owner. For now, I just want to see things firsthand, he said. If I find more of this, then yes, I'll do whatever it takes to expose it. Dana seemed satisfied with that. I'll start compiling records from the other locations. If anything looks off, I'll flag it. Harrison appreciated her initiative. She had spent years under Greg's control, but now that she had the chance to lead, she wasn't hesitating. As she turned to leave, she paused. The staff is still wary, she admitted. They're glad Greg is gone, but they've been burned before. It'll take time for them to believe things are really changing. Harrison met her gaze. Then we'll prove it to them. The next morning, Harrison arrived before the first shift started. The restaurant was quiet, the only sounds coming from the kitchen where the prep team was getting ready for the day. He walked through the dining area, observing everything with fresh eyes. It wasn't just about fixing the immediate issues. He needed to understand how to make real, lasting improvements. Lewis was already there, setting up his cleaning cart near the entrance. Harrison approached him, noting the way the older man still carried himself with quiet caution. "Morning, Lewis," he said. Lewis looked up, nodding once. "Morning, sir." Harrison gestured toward the cart. "How's the new role treating you?" Lewis wiped his hands on a rag before answering. "It's different, more responsibility. But I'll do the job right." There was no excitement in his voice, just quiet determination. Harrison respected that. "If you need anything more supplies, extra help, you let me know. No one should have to struggle to do their job." Lewis studied him for a moment before nodding again. "I appreciate that." Harrison didn't push the conversation further. Trust wasn't built with words alone. It had to be earned. As the morning rush started, he moved through the restaurant, watching the staff interact with each other. The shift in atmosphere was subtle, but it was their servers weren't as tense, the kitchen wasn't as frantic, and Dana was stepping into her role with quiet confidence. Then, just after noon, a man in a corporate-branded polo walked in. Harrison recognized him immediately. Mark, one of the district managers who had been reporting to him for years. Mark spotted him and made a beeline for the counter. "Harrison," he said, keeping his voice low. "I just heard about Greg." "You fired him without consulting anyone." Harrison kept his expression neutral. "I didn't need to consult anyone. He was stealing from the company and mistreating his employees." Mark's jaw tightened. "We have processes for this kind of thing. You can't just walk in and start making changes without following protocol." Harrison met his gaze steadily. "Greg was creating a toxic work environment and manipulating payroll. You knew him well. Did you ever notice anything off?" Mark hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. "I trusted my managers to handle their stores," he said finally. Harrison didn't let him off the hook, "and that's exactly how this happened. I trusted reports instead of seeing things for myself." Mark shifted uncomfortably. "So what now?" "You're going to micromanage every location." Harrison didn't react to the challenge in his tone. "I'm going to make sure what happened here isn't happening anywhere else." Mark sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look, I'm not saying Greg was a saint, but this kind of shakeup is going to cause waves. Some managers might push back. Then they're welcome to leave," Harrison said. "I'd rather lose people who condone this kind of behavior than let it continue." Mark exhaled heavily. "You're really serious about this?" Harrison didn't respond immediately. He glanced around the restaurant, watching as employees moved with a little more confidence as customers received better service. "I built this company to be better than this," he said finally. "I won't let it turn into something I don't recognize." Mark studied him for a long moment before nodding slowly. "All right, I'll start looking into the other locations, see if there's anything similar." Harrison appreciated the shift in his tone. Mark wasn't pushing back anymore, he was starting to understand. As the lunch rush continued, Harrison stayed on the floor, watching, listening, making notes. This wasn't just about fixing one problem. It was about rebuilding the entire foundation of his company. And he wasn't going to stop until it was done right.